Is your black and gray lacking? Have you been slacking on your packing? Stick around. I got a few tips that'll help you achieve that smooth, seamless black and gray. Take your tattoo game to the next level. So before we get into technique, let's talk equipment. Do yourself a favor, go out and purchase a quality tattoo machine. Make the investment in yourself, make the investment in your career. This is the Shader Wand by Bishop Rotary. Hands down, one of the best machines on the market, if not the best shader wands on the market. And it's my go-to for black and gray realism portrait style shading. Extremely consistent, extremely easy to use, easy to break down. Been using it for years and I do not plan on switching up. I also have the battery pack on the back. It just eliminates cords. It allows a little bit more mobility. It just makes things a lot easier for me. Secondly, the equipment that you use will definitely make a huge difference in the quality of tattoos that you produce. Spend the money on good quality cartridges. They're not all created equal. Not all brands deliver the same quality. Some of my favorites are Cheyenne, of course. Bishop Rotary also makes some that work really well with their machines. So go out and make the investments in yourself. It will make a huge difference in your tattoo game. Last but not least is going to be your ink. You're going to want a quality, consistent gray wash. A lot of companies make their own gray wash sets, which are cool, but I like to mix my own. I use the 12-6-3-1 method, and I'll show you that a little bit later on in the video. I like that method because it's consistent across the board. So if I have to come back and touch up a tattoo, I know exactly what to mix up. I don't have to worry about it. It's the same every single tattoo. So there's 4 key components when it comes to achieving that ideal black and gray. That's your needle depth, your voltage, your hand speed, and a proper stretch on the skin. Now your voltage is going to be determined by your hand speed. The faster you move your hand, the faster you want to run your machine. The slower you move your hand, the slower you move your machine. In general, I like to run mine at 9 volts. That just matches my hand speed. You can play with that and dial in what works best for you. But as a rule of thumb, I wouldn't go above 9 volts because you run the risk of overworking the skin or tearing the skin. And I wouldn't go lower than 8.5 to 7.5 because then you're really not getting the ink in the skin. You're just causing a little bit more trauma than necessary. Needle depth, I like to keep mine between 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch. And that's going to vary depending on the area of the skin I'm working. So if I'm working in an area that's a little more elastic, like let's say the ribs or an inner arm, I might set my needle out a little bit farther to like 1/4 of an inch just to make sure I get that penetration that I need. If I'm working something like a shin or a forearm, I'll definitely keep it right at the 1/8 of an inch. But like I said, you're gonna have to play around with these and find what works best for you. Now, a proper stretch on the skin, taut, not tight. There is a huge difference. You wanna stretch it enough so that the needle actually penetrates and is not bouncing off of the skin. But if you're stretching too tight, you'll actually result in a tear in the skin because you're putting so much pressure on it that when you actually puncture the skin, it just wants to separate. So just enough stretch, and this is another thing you're gonna have to get a feel for, but just enough stretch on the skin so that needle penetrates and that color saturates without effort. You want your machine to do all of the work. You don't want to have to force your hand or force that needle into the skin with your hand. If you have to force it, that means one of 3 things. Either you're not stretching enough, you're not running your machine high enough, or you don't have the proper voltage. Or a combination of the 3. So practice these techniques, figure out which works best for you. Every single person is going to be different. The practice makes perfect. So when it comes to your gray wash mix, consistency is key. You want to keep the same mix every single time. So if you have to go back and touch up a tattoo, or you're doing a sleeve or a back piece that takes multiple sessions, you want to make sure your tones are consistent across the board. My favorite brand of ink is Dynamic. I mean, there's probably more brands on the market than I can count, but I've been using this for years. It's tried and true. It mixes easy. It works for me. So I just take the headache out of it. Go ahead and get yourself a bottle of Dynamic. So this is my setup every time. I have 5 caps. My first cap is always going to be straight black. For that, I use a triple black by Dynamic. Shake it up real good. Simple. Fill that cap to the top. There's our straight black. Now these other 4 are going to be our dilution. So I'm going to put 12 drops in the first one. 5, 6, 7, 8, come on, 9, 10, 11, 12. Cool. 6. 3 in this one, and then 1 in the last. And then I top them all off with distilled water.
What?
Now my mix is consistent every single time. I don't have to worry about it. As long as you follow the tones on your reference, match them to the tones of your mix, it takes the guesswork out of it. And then I always keep a cup of distilled water here, so when I go from cap to cap, I always rinse my needle off in the distilled water just so I don't dilute these. So here's another tip I'll throw out there for you. After your session, and you're clearing off your station, and you got your wash cup, it's all nasty and gritty. Instead of trying to carefully walk over to the sink and not spill it on your brand new Jordan 3s, I keep a jar of diaper polymer on my desk. And what this does is, you take a scoop of it, drop it in there, wait about 30 seconds, and it turns that water into gel, into a solid gel. You can just pick it up, toss it in the trash.
A few moments later.
So there's 4 shading techniques I use on all my black and gray pieces. Just remember the 4 P's: push, pull, pendulum, and packing. So the pendulum technique. This is when you use your hand like a pendulum, swinging back and forth over the skin in a brushing motion. This allows you to build the tones up really slow while still giving you a very, very soft, more realistic feel to the piece. So the pull technique is when you start at the edge of a line and you pull back towards you like you're sweeping the floor. This allows you to work in really tight spaces, but it still gives you a nice soft feathered edge when you're done. So the push technique is self-explanatory. That's when you start at the edge of your line and you push away from you in a brushing motion. This gives you a lot more control when you're working in tight areas. So packing is when you're saturating an area with color. To achieve this, you're going to do tight counterclockwise circles. You want to slowly build that ink into the skin. You can also do cross-hatching, side to side, back and forth motions, just to make sure you're not leaving any open areas. But just be very careful that you don't overwork the skin. So take these tips, apply them to your tattoo game, and watch the transformation happen. It's going to take some hours behind the machine, but practice makes perfect. Once you master these techniques, you'll elevate your game to a whole nother level. So if you found this video helpful, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. I got a lot more content coming your way. Drop me a comment down in the comment section. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you want to see in future videos. I'd love to hear your feedback. So I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.